At Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools, all kids go to school. The more we know about your child before they start school, the better we are able to provide a fulsome, supportive program for them. In addition to the information we receive from you, we also count on the professionals who worked with your preschooler to share their knowledge and expertise. This school team is happy to collaborate with you and these individuals in planning your child's transition into kindergarten. The district has an inclusive education team available to support these students with additional needs. This team is the group of specialists who collaborate with classroom teachers and families to establish and monitor the interventions, goals, and strategies being put in place to help your child be safe and successful at school.
Good evening, everybody. Oh, I see somebody waving at us. So I'll just start with a land acknowledgement as we get going. And we have this acknowledgement that's been gifted to us by Auntie Joan Brown, who is one of our Sunimo elders in the community. And so she's provided this as a gift to the district. So I'll just share it with everyone. With great respect and humility, we acknowledge and honor the lands of the Snuneymuxw, Snuneymuxw, and Stumeenus people. The Snuneymuxw people maintain their profound, unique, and spiritual connection to the land through ageless traditions, teachings, stewardship, and expressions of reciprocity. So I just want to acknowledge that we probably are spread across all three of those territories this evening if we're coming from different places in the district, and it's really lovely to have this connection to the land in relationship with our First Nations community. So thank you for joining us this evening. As Cheryl said, I'm Keri Steele. My role in the district is Director of Instruction for Inclusive Education. I live mostly in the elementary world, but I do work across the system as well. And with me tonight, I'll let Amy and Genevieve introduce themselves, but I have brought some others who have lots of expertise in early learning and how we support our little ones coming to school. So yeah, so go ahead, Amy, you're to my right, so maybe I'll put you up next.
Sure, thanks so much, Keri. Yeah, my name is Amy Blow, and I'm a district learning coordinator, and I carry the early years portfolio. So I get to take part in wonderful events like this and do all things early years, which just fills my heart with so much joy. So I'll pass it over to Jen.
Thank you. I was trying to unmute, but I was not allowed to. Good evening, everyone. My name is Genevieve Busby. I'm part of the inclusion support team in the school district. So we are a team of 4 coordinators and 2 educational assistants, and we visit all schools, elementary and secondary schools, and support school-based teams in supporting students with diverse learning needs across the district. So I'm really happy to be here with you tonight.
Thanks. So Amy and Jen and I had a conversation about how to best share information in this digital world that we're sitting in this evening. So I'm going to screen share, and we'll begin by having Amy share a little bit of information about kindergarten classrooms and programs and what life in kindergarten looks like. I have some information about the broad supports and additional things that we can provide for learners who need an extra hand with things. And then Genevieve's going to walk us through a transition planning tool that we've developed that will help you with collecting and sharing the information that you would like the school to have for your child as they're starting. And our hope is that we'll cover off on lots of the questions that we hear quite often from families, but our intention is to only spend about 15 minutes kind of doing those pieces with you so that you have lots of time to ask us questions and we can make sure that the things that brought you to the conversation tonight are answered. If you haven't seen it yet, we have had a booklet called All Kids Go to School for a number of years, and we did a big refresh on it this year. And one of the things that we did with it was digitize it so that it's available online. So when I share my screen, what I'll be sharing with you is the screen of these different documents and things. They do exist as links off of the school district website, so you can go back to them at any time if you would like to take another peek. And there is a link on each of these sites to download a print copy of it as well, if that's something that you would like to do. So let me just get my screen up and running, and then Amy can start us off. Oh, I think what's going on here? There we go. Oh, it's giving me sharing options, but not. Amy, am I sharing the wrong screen? I can't tell what's. Sorry, folks. I usually work in Teams and I'm finding Zoom a little bit. There we go. So it says I'm sharing my screen. Am I sharing the wrong screen? Is that the problem?
You're not, there's nothing showing up.
There's nothing showing up at all.
So once you pick your screen, there'll be the window and you actually have to hit the blue button on the
Oh, that didn't come
right
up the
that
first
says
time. My mouse
switch
was doing
session.
something weird. Yeah, I was waiting for that and I didn't see it. So there we go. Came up this time.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, all of us Teams
We
people
got it.
using Zoom.
Oh goodness. And then the page is bumped on me because I've been clicking too many things. Okay, let me get to the top and let's start for real here. Thanks. Thanks for your patience, everybody. Go ahead, Amy.
Thank you so much, Keri. So I'm so excited to share this information about kindergarten with you. Kindergarten is full day and it has been for a while. And I want to say long ago, but it actually wasn't that long ago when it went to full day. And, you know, having kindergarten full day doesn't mean that we need to rush into academics at an earlier age, but rather we have more time to enhance the overall development of our children. And it provides more time for play-based learning and exploration and inquiry with hands-on experiences. And we have a few provincial documents that, you know, give us this permission to play while we are learning, because play is our work. And that is how children learn, is through play. And it has a profound impact on all areas of their growth, their learning, and their development. And so in kindergarten, there are opportunities for all types of play, such as free play, which might look like centers or choice time, collaborative play, to playful learning and games with specific learning intentions or goals in mind with the teacher. And your kindergarten day is filled with songs and stories and paints and blocks and gym and music and so much more. You know, kindergarten really is a special time of your child's journey in education. And I know that when your child comes, the kindergarten teachers are just as excited as you and your child are to be starting that journey. And, you know, it's a really exciting time of year for the teachers. So on this site here, which is wonderful to have available now online, there's the information for the registration. And then here, thanks. Yeah, the gradual entry, that's great, Keri. That's what I was going to speak to. Gradual entry is a really special time of the year where the kids come in smaller groups for shorter periods of time, and we build upon that slowly over the course of the gradual entry period. And then typically the first full day of kindergarten takes place on Wednesday of the second week of school. And this is just a nice time to get to know the teacher, get to know the children, get to know each other and learn different routines. And, you know, you might find that your child is shy at first, and, you know, but over time, as they get to know the classroom routines and become familiar with the space, they open up and they adjust really quickly, and so they will grow so much over the course of the year. So I kind of spoke to this part a little bit for a typical day in kindergarten, but these are some things that kindergarten children may experience, such as a morning routine with a nice soft start. So, you know, some children are getting their shoes on and getting their backpacks set up for the day in their cubby area. You can touch base with the teacher, and some children then could be moving to what might be called a morning table with some play activities to start their day. Lots of play-based literacy and math activities. As I said, songs, stories, dances, poems. Learning could take place inside the classroom, maybe even some outdoor learning, whole class inquiries, nice quiet periods in the afternoon for nice calm break, because definitely in the first beginning few weeks of kindergarten, your child's going to come home tired. They're big days. So we look for some nice quiet, calm activities in the afternoon. And then we also have exciting opportunities like going to the library to borrow books, going to music, and visiting the gym. And if you just scroll down a little bit more, on the left-hand side, the frequently asked questions. So this is where you can find some information about, you know, what does it look like for the washroom when you're coming to kindergarten? And, the washroom may be in the classroom or close to the classroom, and that, they'll learn and they'll be reminded how to do things like close the door, use the toilet, flush and wash their hands. There's information about recess breaks for supervision during recess. And, the supervisors always wear their duty vests so they're easily identified. And there's information about, indoor shoes and backpacks being, a size that's not too big, that it's hard for your child to manage, and not too small. But typically things that go inside a backpack, like a library book, a lunch kit, a back and forth folder. And yeah, and some information about busing as well, if you're in an area for busing. And
So
can I just add one more piece here at the
Of course.
bottom, where it says you are the guardian and you know your child best. You are your child's first teacher, and during that gradual entry time and throughout the year, we really look forward to getting to know you and your child. So any information you can provide, because you are the expert of your child, is so helpful to us, and we really look forward to building a close and positive relationship with you over the course of the year. Thanks, Keri.
Okay, so just one last piece on this page. There is a little bit of a countdown that describes, well, the countdown's accurate, which is kind of exciting and fun to watch. But there's also some little bits about the different things that will happen in different months that's there for your reference as well. So I do know that some of you have come tonight because you have kids with additional needs and you're just wanting to learn a little bit more about some of those layers of support. So this section here that links to All Kids Go to School takes us to the next piece of information that we were hoping to share with you this evening. So we do have lots of support available for students with diverse abilities. The best way to access that support is to have really fulsome transition conversation and planning with the team at your child's school. So we're going to share a couple of pieces around how to do that really effectively tonight, but just it's really, really important to us that if you have things you'd like us to know about your child, you get an opportunity to do that in a really fulsome way. So I'll walk you through some of the things that are available, and we can certainly have some conversation this evening about some specific questions, but I also want to make sure that people know, I mean, this is a public forum and it is something that's being recorded and shared. So if you have broad questions, then by all means ask them this evening. If you have things that are really more personal or detailed around your child's individual care, some of those things would be really well placed in a conversation with the school principal, or I am also available to talk about supports and things through the spring, and I'll make sure that my contact information is left with everybody this evening. So it's no problem at all to have further conversation, because I know that this is not really a place for some of the finer details, but certainly we can give you as much information as we can. So one of the things that I know many people are accessing through the early intervention program is therapy, and you'll be receiving, some of you support, or your child will be receiving support from an OT or a physiotherapist. We do have support at school as well. We're really excited that we've learned that we can continue some of that early intervention until your child turns 6. So if your child's beginning school and is already connected with somebody, I know there's others on the call who have more knowledge of this than me for sure, but the part that we know at school is that the therapists that do the school age therapy program are the same people that do the early intervention program in Nanaimo. So it can actually be quite seamless as we're transitioning. We can maintain some of those early intervention services until your child is 6. After age 6, the service is a little bit more limited. School age therapy is primarily connected to acute health needs, deteriorating physical conditions, or pervasive feeding issues. So it's the umbrella is not quite as broad after their 6th birthday, but certainly we can still use recommendations and things that we've learned through the early intervention program to support your child, and the therapists are available to continue. So that referral is something that would be facilitated through a case manager at school, or if you have a child who requires support but it doesn't have a case manager because they're not supported through an IEP and a formal ministry designation, then the classroom teacher would be the person who could help you further that conversation at the school. Each school also has a part-time speech and language pathologist. So our SLPs do a really, really good job connecting with both the CDC SLPs and the Island Health SLPs in transition conversations in the spring. They collect lots of information and try to keep things moving forward. Certainly if your child is exploring, a LAMP or a touch chat or some other AAC device right now, we can continue to use those things when they come to school. We have an AUGCOM specialist as part of our SLP team, and sometimes she works directly with the children, sometimes she consults to the SLPs at the schools and supports them, but absolutely we can keep those programs going if that's something that is in place for your child now. Or if it isn't and it's something that we determine is an appropriate support, then again, either the case manager or the classroom teacher can help facilitate that referral when school gets started. One of the things that's really, really helpful for us is when we have a consent for information and we have the opportunity to collaborate with your broader team. So, some parents, their level of comfort is that they are fine to give us consent, but they would really like to be part of every conversation. Other folks, help us with the transition conversation and do the consent, but they're also okay with the SLPs talking to each other without necessarily having the parent present for all of those conversations. You get to steer that. You get to decide where you'd like to be in that conversation. Like Amy was saying, you are the one who knows your child best. So we want you to be super comfortable with the arrangements and supports that are in place and with the level and content of information that's being shared. But the way to let us talk to the people on your team is this consent for information. We are not allowed to phone any of the therapists at the Child Development Center or your child's preschool teacher or medical team, or some people are involved with a clinician at Child and Youth Mental Health or somewhere like that. We are happy to collaborate with anyone who you would like us to, but we do need written consent to do that. So you can link to that consent here, and that's something that could be provided to the school team at any time. So then that brings us to the topic of transition meetings. So in May or June, typically we begin to have transition meetings. The student support teachers, which is what they're called right now, but in the website they're called inclusion support teachers because their name's changing over the summer. They don't actually know that yet though. Anyway, the inclusion support teachers will be helping facilitate some of these transition meetings. And so if you have a child with additional needs and you have people on your team that you feel are really important to that transition conversation, you can bring others with you to those meetings. You absolutely don't have to come on your own and try to remember all that information by yourself. Reaching out to the school team and talking with the principal, who will probably put you in touch with a student support teacher to plan those meetings and have those conversations, can happen. We can begin the conversation anytime. I think the school teams will be most prepared to receive that information in May and June after they've kind of moved through some of the other pieces that are happening for the kids they have now. That doesn't mean you can't reach out before then though. You're more than welcome to call the principals at any time and start that conversation. And I'll just say a couple more little pieces, and then Genevieve's going to share the transition planning tool with us. But really, the tool is intended to help share information, but it can also be accompanied by any reports or documents or consultation notes that you have. If your child's been through like a VICAN assessment, for example, anything that you feel would be helpful and relevant for us, we're happy to receive and work with you around. And if there are things that you're also less comfortable with sharing and you want to share some recommendations, but maybe not the whole report, we will work with you. We are on the team. Just let us know where your level of comfort is with that stuff and we will help you. I'm going to just speak to transportation for a minute. So we do have accessible bus routes that provide an additional level of support over the regular buses, but the service on these is quite limited. So typically, if your child's attending their catchment school, if they have a limitation to physical mobility and can't get on a typical school bus, that's where we would look at one of our accessible routes. It's less easy to accommodate children who are cross-boundary, but that which is our transportation policy overall, that ridership cross-boundary is based on availability on the bus. So what would happen is if you're looking for bus transportation that is not the regular transportation, then you would connect again with your child's school and they will provide you with a bus ridership application, and you can submit that, and then we'll work through the request and see what we can do about facilitating that request for you. I know that there are always lots of questions about EA time and the different supports and things that are in place. What I'm thinking is, if it's okay, I might transition to Genevieve's piece, because that's a screen sharing piece. And then maybe we can stop screen sharing and talk some more about EAs and toileting and some of those other supports and things that are at school. The last piece before I go off this page is just a little bit of a decoding of the acronyms, because educators definitely talk in code. And I don't know, somehow BC seems to be even more dramatically that way than some other jurisdictions. So if we're using a whole pile of letters and you don't quite recognize them, first of all, some of them are here, but secondly, I can guarantee you that half of our teams in schools lose track of some of this stuff too. It really is an alphabet soup. So don't ever be shy to say, I don't know that one. That's a new spin for me. And what does that mean? We're happy to decode it at any time, because we forget, because we bandy around this language so frequently. So, okay, I'm gonna zoom up and transition to the planning tool for Genevieve for our last piece of screen sharing here.
Okay, so this year we have made quite a few changes to our kindergarten transition planning tool. On top of having it online, fillable online, we have created some nice categories for you to put all the information you feel you need the school team to know about. So one of the, as part of the inclusion support team, we're often called to help school teams when students are having difficulties adapting to the new school environment, or they're finding it difficult to be in a busy environment and having a lot of people around. Some of them are not used to be with so many people. Maybe they were at home or in a smaller childcare setting. And one of the things that I always ask first is, what does the student like to do, or what does the student like to play with? Because this is how you connect with the student, and this is how you you build relationships and make the student feel comfortable and build from there. So one of the first boxes that I made sure was on the form was strengths and interests, because we need to have as much information about what your child likes to play with, likes to do, and if possible, we will recreate as many of those activities and put a bin of favorite toys and items, so that the child can easily have access to these things when more difficult moments are happening throughout the school day. For example, when there's a transition, or if they need to go from a preferred activity to a non-preferred activity. So that was very important for me to put that box at the top, because I think that's one of the most important part of being at school is to be regulated, so learning can happen and be comfortable in the environment that the child is in. So some of the other boxes you will recognize. They cover medical needs, vision, hearing, communication, sensory preferences, social emotional needs, physical needs, and equipment needs. We have added a question to kind of help you form give us some basic information, but it's up to you to put what you feel the school team needs to know about your child. We have also added some examples, and these are not the only things that needs to be included, and all these things don't need to be part of your child's profile. So there are simply some examples to for some people that might wonder what sensory preferences look like. One of the other aspect that I find very important when working with students that have additional needs is communication. Some students have limited language, and can be difficult for them to communicate their wants and needs, and that might create some frustration for them. So that we all know that behaviors are a way for students to communicate that something is not working for them. So if we have as much information as possible about the way that your child communicates with others, whether it's through objects or photographs or pic symbols, we will try to recreate the same system so that there's consistency between home and school. The other very important aspect that the inclusion support team is available to help with, Keri, if you go a little bit higher in the form, there's a category called safety. So safety is one of the most important aspects for us in the district, that we really want to make sure that all students are safe. When I refer to safety, I'm thinking about your child staying with the group, your child staying within the classroom, the school grounds, not running, outside of the school property. So safety is very important to us. If you have any concerns around your child's safety, please let us know, and we will. The inclusion support team is really looking for any referrals or we always make a priority of going to see schools where the school-based team has concerns around a student's safety. So I look forward to, I do a lot because of my background as an occupational therapist. I visit a lot of kindergarten classrooms. I love that age group, and we always provide a lot of support for students with additional needs in kindergarten, so that they have the best chance of having a successful start. So I look forward to meeting your child or visiting the classroom that your child will be in.
Thank you. So I think there's a lot of information there, and I'm sure that folks are starting to think of some of their questions. I think there's a few things that we get asked every year that maybe I'll touch on first before we turn it over, and then we'll see where we're at. So I know that one of the questions people always ask is who do you go to? Who do you talk to if you have a concern or a worry, and how does that work? So in transition, this time of year, the principal would be the best person to talk to right now, because they are the ones who will be overseeing all of the bits and pieces of staffing and classroom placement and all of that kind of stuff moving into next year. Once you're settled into a class next year and your child knows who their teacher is, and the year is kind of rolling, the teacher is always your best point of contact. That is the person who will know your child best at school, and also know the resources and the processes best in terms of how to advocate for additional services, or who to go to if we need a visual, or those kinds of things. If your child has a formal medical diagnosis that leads to a ministry designation for an education plan, then they will have an individualized education plan. If you have a child who has additional needs, but they haven't been formally diagnosed, and we're not in a place where we have the documentation that would be required for a designation, we have a thing we call a student support plan, which looks an awful lot like an IEP, but it doesn't have a ministry category on it. Really, that's the difference. It's still goals and strategies. It's still thoughtful planning. We still can look at accommodations and additional supervision if it's needed, and all of those kinds of things. I'm proud to be part of BC Education right now, because I think we've been trending in the right direction for a while, and we're really in a healthy place right now. So, it used to be that without an IEP, it was really hard for families to advocate for supports and for schools to allocate resources for kids that didn't kind of qualify under a ministry designation. We do all of our resources on a needs-based model now. So that means children who require additional supports and help with things, which includes things like additional supervision on the playground or assistance with toileting if they need it, help with, you know, peer interactions and self-regulation and all of those kinds of things. We can provide those supports to learners who need them, whether they're designated or not. So it's really, you know, please don't be shy about speaking up at school and letting the team know if you have some concerns for your child. They really I mean, all teachers are compassionate people. Kindergarten teachers sign up to be people who are really in tune with little tiny people and, you know, really want to do what they can do to transition kids into school. I can see Amy smiling. She's spent a lot of time in kindergarten before she moved into this role. And, you know, they really do work hard to wrap around children and families. So the more we can collaborate together, the better experience it'll be for everybody, for sure. So if you have a concern around toileting or supervision or, you know, safety, and, you know, Jen described some of the big circumstances around safety. There are also other occasions where we know that, you know, some little people always want to climb up the slide and never do that without falling off the side of it. And, you know, we want to make sure there's extra hands on the playground to make sure that they're safe and not climbing up on something they shouldn't be on, that kind of thing. We do typically have additional supervision anyway for kindergarten children at the beginning of the year. Often they're actually wearing a t-shirt or a vest or something that's different than the other children. They're often asked to play in a certain area of the playground for a period of time, and we gradually release them to the broader school. But even beyond that, we have children who have individual supervision outside. And, you know, our hope is always to build independence with children, but especially with kindergarten students, we try to err on the side of more support before we wean off of that, because we really do know it takes some time to acclimatize themselves to a new setting and understand the routines and structures, and even just how to find a safe grown-up outside and all of that kind of stuff. So we really work hard to support those things. If your child has a challenge with vision or hearing, we do have a specialist teacher of the hearing impaired and a teacher of the visually impaired in the district. They typically provide a lot of consultation to school teams and additional support. Kids with really complex hearing or vision needs will be case managed by those individuals, but often children with mild or moderate conditions will be case managed by somebody at the school, but that person will provide consultation and support to make sure we have everything in place that we need. And if there's a need for specialized equipment or large print books and those kinds of things, they have access to the provincial resource programs and can access those things for us. So we are able to provide some of those adapted materials for sure. In terms of the process to get an IEP, how that works is that you would provide the school with this bundle of information that we're talking about tonight, the transition tool, copies of reports and documentation, that kind of thing. There would be, so the transition meeting would happen now. The IEP meeting would happen more like October. Usually what happens is we have the children settle into school. It's really important to us that they attach to the community, to the school, to their classroom and peers, and just you know, learn how to be a little one at school and kind of get the year rolling. And then after the teachers have had some time to get to know the kids, and the support teachers have had some time to do some observations and kind of understand how things are working at school, we would have the IEP meeting typically mid to late October. Amy, do you think about there usually? Yeah. And so what that would look like is a chance for you and anybody else that you feel you would like to bring to the table with you. Some people choose to bring behavior interventionists or outside therapists or an advocate with them. I know, I think Kimberly's on the call with us tonight. She knows lots about how to find advocacy support if that's something that you would like to have somebody there. Sometimes it's nice to have another person just to take notes and kind of help ask questions, because I know it's, I know from sitting at my own child's IEP meetings that sometimes when you sit at a table of 8 people who all have thoughts about your child's program, even when you know lots about what you want to say and ask for, it can become a little overwhelming. So absolutely bring a support with you if that's something you would like to do. After that IEP meeting, there would be some goals and some brainstorming and dialogue around it, and then a draft document would come to you that you get a chance to offer feedback on again, and we would finalize that. IEP progress reports will come with regular report cards. So you will get the classroom report card about your child's experience and progress, and you will also get an update on the IEP goals and how that's going. And then that typically is reviewed late May, beginning of June, with an eye to creating some bridging goals into the next year, so that we've already got some things in place and we're ready to kind of hit the ground running with the new school year, the following after the summer. And The school also has a structure they call school-based team, which is a really important table for problem solving. So if you have a concern about your child's learning or social development or tools and strategies and things that are being used, the classroom teacher would be the place to start. And if that person is able to chat with you and you can come up with some strategies and things together, then that's where we begin. But if, you know, together you're feeling like you still have some questions and would like some additional resources or feedback from others on the team, then the classroom teacher would put in a referral to school-based team. The school-based team typically is classroom teacher, our student support teachers would all be there. The speech and language pathologist is there, school psychologist who supports, we have one for about every 6 or 7 schools in the district. So the person attached to your child's zone would be there, and the school administrators there. Often the counselor and child care, youth care worker would also be present. And that's a place where there's sort of brainstorming and dialogue and some suggestions around strategies and things. If there's a question about an assessment, an academic or achievement assessment that's going to be done, or if your child has never had a cognitive assessment and at some point in their journey, kindergarten's not a typical year to decide to do that because they are pretty little still, and usually those would be done as part of a medical process when they're that little. But if later in their journey, the school-based team is looking at additional update that way, the referral would happen through that school-based team. And it is the classroom teachers that submit those referrals. And then I know Genevieve was describing inclusion support and some of the things they do. Inclusion support is the team that the school-based team reaches out to if they're looking for some additional supports and strategies. So, you know, sometimes our very complex learners, it's just nice to have another pair of hands and some advice or recommendations from a group of people that are immersed in that very complex work all the time. And so that's where the school-based team would submit a referral to inclusion support. Inclusion support is a little bit different. They don't provide direct service to students in the sense of maintaining an active caseload or being added to the child's care team. They are actually a support to the staff at the school. So the referral would go in for a request for some observations and some capacity building, and they help the school team refine the plans and figure out some next pieces, but it would still remain the responsibility of the school-based team to oversee those recommendations and implement them. I'm just looking at my cheat sheet to see if I've covered things. I don't know if Amy or Jen, do either of you have another piece to add now before we open it up for questions? Or
No, I think you did really well there.
My bullets maybe got us partway there. So yeah, so folks, if you have any questions or things you're wondering, the chat is open, and Amy and Jen and I will all jump in depending on the question and who the best one of us to answer it is. So feel free to pop them in. Oh, it's pretty quiet. I see there's at least one parent on the call tonight who I owe an email to, so I promise I will answer your question. I got an email from somebody yesterday I haven't responded to yet. So
If people want to ask the question out loud, Keri, do you want us to unmute them?
Sure, if they'd like to, we could do that. We certainly don't want anybody to feel pressure to do that, knowing it's recorded, but we're happy to hear from you. Do you need to be registered with a school before reaching out to the principal? That is a super question. So no, you don't, but we can't really start planning meetings and transition meetings and things like that until you're registered. But I know there are families that are trying to make some decisions about school start and what the best fit for their family is right now. And school principals have lots and lots of information about how things work at their school. And I know that they're happy to chat with people and answer questions. I see a question about quick overviews of IEPs. Did I answer enough around that question, or were there other pieces that we can add to that? Just what the content of it is, maybe? Typically, IEPs contain some background information. They'll have a little bit of medical and assessment history where that's relevant. And then we do a profile of your child's strengths and also their areas of need for support. And then we zero in on some individual goals that can support them. And the goals will usually, it'll be a goal statement with a couple of objectives and then some strategies or interventions or approaches that can support those. And we usually identify who on the team is going to provide it. So sometimes the goal will be related to an academic area that the classroom teacher is going to support. Sometimes we have a child who has some EA support, and the EA may have a piece of that as well as the classroom teacher. We structure all our IEP goals through I can statements now to really make sure that they're child focused and centered. And as kids get bigger, and actually even some of our little guys have some big feelings and ideas about what they'd like for themselves at school. And we work really hard to capture student voice where that's appropriate. Probably the first meeting in kindergarten is, not a time where most kids are going to happily sit at a table with a bunch of adults and tell us all kinds of stuff. They're probably not ready for that yet, but certainly we have ways of having that dialogue as time goes on and adding layers and feedback. The nice thing about an IEP is it is a living document. So just because we set goals in September or October doesn't mean they have to stay that way for the whole school year. We try really hard to set goals that are kind of a just right size. In the past, I remember looking at IEPs where the goals were really like life dreams, and they were things that were going to take the kids years and years and years to achieve. It's really hard to measure and monitor success when the goals are too giant. So we really try to set things that even if we have a giant goal in mind, we try to set one that's sort of a 1 year size target in terms of the objectives and things, so that we do have a way to collect some data and monitor and support that, and know at the end of the school year if we have put some things in place that have worked and if the child's progressing with those skills. The other thing that IEPs will contain is a list of any adaptations or supports. So you don't see this typically as much in kindergarten because it is a play-based environment that's really developed around the needs of very young learners. But certainly some of our kids, as they get older, there will be some students who are later to read or struggle with numeracy or need some intentional supports in the classroom. And so we try to document all that on the IEP. What's more typical on the IEPs for the little ones is if they need some supports with peer interactions or self-regulation or calming strategies. If we're using a specific fidget or we're providing access to a specific environment or something to facilitate that, all of that will be on the IEP so that we're all aware of which strategies and supports are in place. Amy and Jen, is there anything else on IEPs before we go to the next question? Okay.
Nope, that's good.
Okay. Oh, I knew this question was coming tonight, and I even have half an answer for you. So, are kids who were held back last year due to developmental delays being skipped to grade 1? Okay, so I don't know is the answer to that, but I'll tell you why. I have some more information around it. So we understood as a school district that the ministry's direction was if families deferred a year, that the typical pathway would be to enroll them with their same age peers when they come to school the following September. This week we have done some more research because I think it's not just due to COVID that some families have chosen to defer a year of kindergarten. There's definitely some developmental reasons why some children are staying home for that extra year and accessing some of those supports and therapies and things. So I don't have the final document ready yet because it is still kind of going through district processes for approval and things. But we have reached out to the ministry to confirm that we do have ways to make exceptions to that. And the way that we do that is really, really good dialogue with you as their parents to make sure that you understand kind of the pros and cons of, is kindergarten or grade 1 the better choice after, well, first of all, deferring at all is an important conversation because I think there are kids that really benefit from that extra time. And then there's other children that actually, sometimes we talk with families and they learn a little bit more about what kindergarten looks like and what we can offer in the environment, because it really is very different from how it was even a handful of years ago. So we just want to make sure families really understand what kindergarten could offer, whether it's now or later, and what the difference between going to kindergarten later or going to grade 1 later would look like. And so there's going to be lots more information coming about that. It may take until after spring break before I can work it through all the channels because not everybody's available over the next couple of weeks. But our intention would be that by early April, there will be a link off of that All Kids Go to School page that will provide you with a whole bunch of information. But we do want to work with you and we absolutely want to make decisions that are in the best interest of the kids. So if you can have a little bit of patience with us, that process will be much clearer soon. Yeah. Who do you reach out to before the start of the school year regarding your child? And will someone reach out to me regarding the transition meeting? Okay, so the principal would be the person to reach out to now. In terms of the transition meeting, my suggestion would be to arm the school with a little bit of information when you do reach out to the principal. If the principal has a copy of this transition planning form, or this in addition to any copies of reports or assessments or things that you think would be helpful for the school, that will alert the school team to the notion that a transition meeting is really important. And then you should hear from somebody from the school. Most likely it'll be one of the support teachers would be reaching out to set up those meetings later in the year. But I would encourage you to, have some communication with the principal fairly soon after spring break, and just let them know that you'd really like to do that meeting. And that, if you're intending to bring others with you, you may need a little bit of time to gather everybody, right, and be available. So whatever information you can give the principal now will help them make sure that those meetings happen in a really timely and supportive way for you.
Can I take the next question, Keri?
I was just going to ask if you wanted that one. Yeah.
Awesome. So the next question is, are there supports to challenge students in kindergarten that may need higher level maths, for example? And, this is what's so wonderful about having a play-based program, is that it is so easily differentiated then for wherever your child is at. So wherever your child is at is right where they need to be. And, when through their play and through planned learning activities, when a kindergarten teacher is working with your child, they will know where your child is at, and they can encourage like further exploration of a certain concept, or they also could be providing further support on practicing a specific skill as well. So there's definitely lots of opportunity to challenge and explore further.
Yeah. That's another piece around the redesign that BC's curriculum had about 5 years ago that's really, really exciting, is the primary program has been on a continuum for a long time. It actually is a K-3 curriculum along a developmental continuum on purpose, because we know kids come to skills in their own ways and time, and we want to really be able to meet them in the place where they need us. But the change 5 years ago has really focused on what Amy described, in the sense that we really try to meet kids where they're at and stretch them to whatever's next. Whether that's additional support or additional challenge, we really work hard to do that. And play is just such a beautiful way to be able to do that. Yeah. IEPs always done in October or only for kindergarten? Nope, that's always done in October. The meetings typically will happen in October, and then the teachers take some time to craft the documents and refine them. And we ask that they're all like polished and stamped done by the beginning of December. So it does take a little while, which is partly why we set transition goals in May typically, because as your child's moving into grades beyond kindergarten, we want to be able to provide the classroom teacher in September with some good information to get the year started. And then after they've settled into their new environment, we learn a little bit more about them and how they're interacting in that new setting. And it's a good time to refine the goals, because every September will feel a little bit different, right? Fewer, different peers in the class, different physical classroom. Most years it'll be a different teacher. So we just need to make sure that we have taken that time to kind of settle in the fall every year. If a child has an EA, do they join them on the playground? Child will run away. If children need support on the playground, they will have that EA on the playground. We do have children who require a little bit of additional support in the classroom, but are fine outside. We have other children who do really well in the classroom when they've got a group plan to follow, but when it's unstructured play, it's a lot more challenging for them. And they only have EA support outside because that's the place that they require it. So if your child is prone to running, please make sure we know that, because we absolutely will do what we can to help. And for some kids, it's not a long-term concern, but certainly when they're in a new setting and environment and they're still exploring and kind of figuring things out, it's more interesting to go beyond the fence, right? So we absolutely will work with you and make sure that we've got those supports in place for sure. Jen might want this one. If we're unsure of what level of supports may be needed for our child, can we just fill out the tool and give it to the teacher at the beginning of the year?
I think the tool is relevant for any families that have concerns in any of the areas that are included in the transition tool. I would encourage as many families to complete it and give it to the principal, or just your school secretary will make sure that it lands in the right hands, and then it will make its way to the school-based team. And then if the school-based team feels that they need some additional support, like Keri said, to refine some of the strategies and supports for that student, then they will contact us. The inclusion support team works is based on referrals. However, for kindergarten this year, we are thinking about using the transition planning tool to facilitate the process, because then we will have the information faster and then be able to provide support straight away from the beginning of the year. So I would invite you to use that transition planning tool and provide it at the transition meeting or drop it off at your school. And then the quicker we have that information, the more planning we can do and put the support in place from early in September.
Yeah, just another piece of the question was about being unsure about the level of supports needed for your child. We actually redesigned the form with that question in mind. So in the past, the form had some places where families could potentially suggest what level of support they felt their child needed. And what we've learned over time is that that's a really hard question to ask families when their children haven't been to school yet, because it can look really different in different settings. And sometimes the level of support they required in preschool or in a daycare setting increases or decreases significantly based on how they respond to the school setting, how much they mature over the summer. Like there's all kinds of factors at play. And the other piece is that schools have a lot of different kinds of supports. So sometimes, extra supervision or support from an EA for sure is the thing that we need to put into place. But other times, classroom teachers have a lot of beautiful structures and routines and visuals and things that they use that can be very, very supportive. Sometimes we have student support teachers or SLPs that will teach right in the classroom alongside the classroom teacher and partner over some strategies. We're really quite strategic about groupings and things. Sometimes our school psychologists will do observations and offer some suggestions. So rather than putting you in a position where you're asking for things and you might not even know what all the choices are, which isn't really fair, what we want from you is what you know best, which is your child and how they present and their strengths and their interests. That piece around what do they like to do is really super helpful for us, plus the pieces around the specific services and things you've had so far in terms of how they're presenting and what kinds of interventions are in place. That helps us make really good informed decisions at our end. I don't know, Amy, was there a piece on classrooms that you want to add to that, or should I go ahead and jump on to the next question?
I just wanted to, I wouldn't mind to add, like some things that I've done in my kindergarten classroom is like even having the shape of the day with some visuals, that can support one specific student or it actually supports all the students in the class. So, in kindergarten, a lot of the things like you were saying, Keri, a lot of the things that the kindergarten teacher will be doing will be to support all the children, but different children will respond to that in different ways. But the tools that we use are like they're good for everybody and very inclusive. And we work hard to make sure that our classrooms are inclusive and welcoming spaces.
Thanks. So I want to register my daughter in an out-of-catchment school for September. Who should I be talking to? Okay, so on the page that Amy shared with us, at the very top, there's a button for registration. And how it actually works for out of catchment is you go through that registration button and you register your child in their catchment school and then put in an out of catchment, out of boundary, cross boundary request as part of that registration process. So all of our registration in our district is done through our central registration office. Principals don't actually, it used to be that people had to go to the different physical schools with the papers and then we kind of traded things between buildings when cross-boundary requests were approved. It's all managed centrally now. So what you would do is go through that registration button, identify that you have a cross-boundary request. If your cross-boundary request is related to your child's additional needs and there's a support or accessing something at the other end that is part of the reason that you've requested that, make sure you put that in the notes on the application. Cross-boundary requests are really challenging for the school district right now because we are getting kind of full. Our schools are really, really busy places. And so we do thoughtfully look at them. Certainly if a child is applying for cross-boundary and there's already a sibling in the cross-boundary school, sibling requests are considered first because we do really want to keep families together where we can. So most of the time those will go through. Beyond that, it's really a case-by-case decision, and it's entirely based on capacity at the cross-boundary school and whether or not they have room to take in additional students. Some of those decisions get made in June, but more typically those decisions get made in August. So it can be a little bit of a wait while you're waiting to hear. And that is because we have to give in-catchment families the opportunity to get registered and see where our numbers are at. We honor them where we have space. We do our best to do that. But if the classes are full at a cross-boundary school, we can't add additional classrooms to accommodate cross-boundary applications. So it gets a little bit trickier when the buildings are really, really full. So there have been circumstances in the past with families who have really complex circumstances, and it can be difficult to capture that by putting a notation on a registration request. So if you feel like your circumstances are individual and complex and that's a hard way to share that information, feel free to call me. I talk to lots of families every year, and I can't guarantee that we can be successful in it, but I can definitely guarantee that I will help present your family's story and advocate for the cross-boundary request where it's possible, for sure. CDC and preschool workers and teachers being involved in transition meetings. They are involved if you help us invite them. So if you've signed the consent for information and you have indicated to us that you would like them to come, typically what we'll do is give you the day and time of the meeting in advance, or we'll give you a few possible days and times of the meeting so you can connect with your team and invite whomever you would like to have. But we welcome anybody who's got knowledge and understanding of your child's needs to help us get to know them. We have to kind of hit the ground running in the fall with kids that are complex, right? We don't want to not do things that we already know about because we forgot to ask the question. So yeah, feel free to bring whomever you would like to the meeting with us. French immersion. So we do have all of the supports in French immersion schools that we have in English settings. And actually there's lots of research that shows that kids can be really super successful in first or second language environments as long as we attend to their needs and make sure we provide support. So all of the pieces around the school-based team and all of the individuals on school-based team, IEP planning, any therapies and interventions that we have through our school programs, all of that stuff is available in Immersion. The one place where I would want to have some more conversation for sure is if your child is really significantly supported with communication needs. We are happy to welcome them in Immersion, but I think we would want to make sure we have really good transition conversation between the SLPs just to make sure that we really understand how to support communication in a second language environment. But yeah, please, if that's something that you would like for your child's learning journey, then yeah, we'll work with you and figure it out for sure. A bus from Ladysmith to Cedar. So that you could register or apply for transportation, but when children are cross-boundary, we can't guarantee the transportation. I actually would need to do some investigation about whether or not that's different for Immersion, because I know Immersion isn't in every school. So we would have to look into that. But certainly if a child is accepted for bus transportation and if they can ride a bus with typical peers, then that's easy. If they need more support than that, it is a ridership application and it is considered on a case-by-case basis. For a child who doesn't have mobility difficulties, it's just based on availability. If there's a run that's kind of headed in that direction and has capacity on it, then we'll consider it. But we don't put additional busing in place for cross-boundary requests or for students without mobility without mobility concerns usually. So the buses, there's another question about the accessible bus routes. So Children who ride those routes and have a really difficult time sitting and being safe on the bus, we do work to try to provide routine and structure around that. And if it's, for some kids, it works to have a transition object or a little bin of preferred activities that the driver hands them as they're climbing onto the bus and they plunk down into their seat. For other kids, we know that that's not enough support for sure. So we do have some seat belts, and some of them are safety harnesses, like 5-point clicked in harnesses, so that the kids aren't able to get up from the seat and wander around the bus. So we would work with you to figure out which combination of supports would be necessary for your child. But we do have a few things that we've tried over the years that have worked really well, so we can certainly brainstorm that together and see how we can work through things. Those kinds of things are not available on the regular bus routes, though they are only on the accessible bus routes. We don't have a way to add the harnesses and things to the typical big buses that kind of go through the whole neighborhood. Children who are on the accessible routes don't have to go to the bus stops to get picked up, though. If a child is placed on an accessible bus route, the bus would come to your home in the morning and pick them up and drop them off at the end of the day. So a question about how services from a speech path through the CDC would transfer to the school district. So I see that Robin's with us. I don't know if she wants to jump on, but we the early intervention services continue till age 6. It would be a speech path at the school district who would pick that up when they get there. So that would just be a referral from the classroom teacher to the school-based team to say this child has had speech and language support in the preschool world and needs to access the school supports, school-based supports. And then the school-based SLP would have whatever transition conversations are needed and connect with you and work with the teacher to implement some services. Sorry, it's dry in my office here. My child's on the autism spectrum and has a therapy team. If needed, could he work with them during school hours in the school? Unfortunately, we can't do that. We do have a private practitioner agreement that allows us to collaborate with outside intervention teams, and certainly they can come in and do some observations to inform home and therapeutic programming outside of school. We share observations and try to plan together, and just like Jen referenced, some of the visuals and things that might be in preschool that we try to replicate. Sometimes we will build a common set between home and school with the therapists that way. So again, we have similar things going on, but we are a unionized environment, and we do have individuals that provide intervention and support at school. So we need to have school district employees provide those services in the school setting. We're not able to have outside people provide therapy at school. Okay, so toileting support, and then there's a question about diapering and things as well. So maybe I'll answer them both as one at the same time. So we have lots of kids who come to us in the fall who require toileting support. Some of them, the support is reminders and coaching and somebody to make sure that they head to the washroom, which most kindergartens have one physically inside the kindergarten room, which makes it easier. And if reminders are all we need, then we can build those in. If it's a case of an adult physically going in and helping with pull-ups or underwear and those kinds of things, we can also provide that support. Change tables are not typically inside the kindergarten washroom. So if it's a situation where your child requires diaper changes and things, then we would have an accessible washroom somewhere in the building, and we can certainly take them there and do that. And EA support would be provided for that, whether your child is formally designated or not. If a child needs assistance with toileting, we'll make sure that they have it. And if you have a toileting program that you're working on at home, that's where it can become a little bit more complicated, in that we will do our best to work with you and provide regular opportunities. But I know, I have worked with children in the past where it had to be like really, really regular, like they were going in every 30 minutes or 45 minutes for a break, or not a break, but a try. It's challenging at school to provide that intensive level of support for toileting programs. We will work with you as best we can, though, and definitely make sure that your child's got regular support. And we can absolutely help with changing clothes and diapers and things if that's needed at school. Amy, I don't know if you want to talk about how that kind of unfolds in kindergarten sometimes.
Yeah, I'd love to. This is one of those routines that we learn when we come to school and we check out the bathroom in the classroom, or the bathroom that is in close proximity to the classroom. And, we go in and we look at the toilet and, how do we flush it? How do we take the toilet paper off of the roll? What does the toilet sound like when it flushes? Because some toilets might be automatic, or the urinal might start flushing. And so it's good to know what that sounds like before you're there and it's happening, and might startle if you're not anticipating it. And then just always modeling, of course, the hand washing, how the taps work. Some will have taps that you need to turn on, and some you just have to wave your hands magically underneath the tap, and then how to use the soap and the paper towel and where to put the paper towel after. So that actually is like a really big routine that all children learn when they come into kindergarten. And I know myself as a kindergarten teacher, always, having a kindergarten or bathroom in my classroom, then I can see when they come out and just giving them a little reminder, like, oh, did you wash your hands? Did you flush? And, one person in the bathroom at a time, and closing the door, because sometimes, at home, there may be multiple people in the bathroom, or the door might be left open. And so just learning how to use the washroom at school versus at home. So those are all part of our September routines about learning coming to school.
One other piece that we can do as part of transition, or even separately from the transition meeting if it's needed, is I know that there are children who require like equipment support in the washroom. It might be a bar or a foot platform in front of the toilet basin or something like that. Those are things that we do collaborate with the therapists at the CDC to make sure that we have the right things in place. So we do what we call an accessibility walk, where typically I would go to the school with the therapist, and somebody from the school team would be present, and we'll take pictures and do the measurements and figure out what we need. And if we need a special toilet seat or platform or grab bar or something, we would do our best to order that in like May or June, so that it can be installed over the summer and be ready and available in the fall. So that's definitely another piece when you're doing the transition planning tool. If you have equipment in that way, you don't necessarily need to adapt or list the piece of equipment you need. But if you say that you need, accessibility supports in the washroom, we can certainly reach out to whoever we need to get the details around that. And I know that the team at the CDC has this transition form, and they are super happy to work with you to help you put information on it as well. So if you're not sure what to say, just reach out to somebody on your early intervention team, and they can help you with that. Had one more thought about that and I lost it. I'll answer the next question maybe and see if it comes back to me. Do you need an IEP in order to have an EA assigned to your child? You do not. What we do, the way the structure kind of works, and this is really, it's confusing for lots of people, so I'll try to kind of thread through the pieces a little bit. But what happens for funding for additional services in the school district is that at the end of September every year, and then again there's a recount at the end of February, we have this thing we call the 1701, and it's just part of a database where it kind of counts up children who have designations in different categories. And so some of the categories are don't receive additional funding beyond the per student funding. Some of them receive what they call level 1, 2, or 3 funding, which is different dollar amounts towards a grant based on the designated category. We don't really submit that on a per student basis to the ministry. What happens is we count up the number of designated students in each of the categories, and that data goes to the district and then, or to the ministry, and the ministry provides the school district with what they call a special purpose grant, and it comes as a lump sum to the school district. And then one of my responsibilities in the district is to look at the allocation of resources. So the finance department will let me know that that grant is supplemented with some of the per student funding that comes in and other funding sources. The grant covers about a third of what the services we provide in the system actually cost the district to implement. So finance does all of their magic behind the scenes, and then they will let me know what the staffing envelope is that I have for EAs, support staff, school psychologists, inclusion support coordinators, all of those pieces. And how much money is available for like physical resources, teaching resources and materials and things for the schools. And then it's my job to allocate that out to the system. And the way that I do that is by having really detailed conversations with each of the schools around who the learners in their building are and what the needs are that the children present with. And we always keep a contingency for the following school year, because we'll anticipate as well as we can in April and May when that planning is happening. But There are always children who end up at a different school than we expected, or who move in or out of the district over the summer, or whose needs change over the summer. So what we do is then in turn, I allocate a pocket of resources and staffing to each school, and the school-based team in conjunction with the principal at that school figures out the best places to allocate those resources. So any child in the school who requires the support of an EA is eligible to receive EA support. Like I mentioned earlier, that's not the only support available. We do have lots of things that support teachers, and the speech pathologist and the psychologist and school counselor and other child and youth care worker can offer as support. So school-based team figures out the best way to allocate resources, to group children for different learning opportunities, to strategically create classes even. Sometimes we have children with a similar need that if we put them together, they can actually receive more direct support from their classroom teacher in that regard. So we try really hard to not talk about whether or not a child is designated when we allocate supports. What we use the IEP for is really intentional personalized planning. It's a very individualized bunch of goals and strategies, and it helps us just stay focused on the things that we know will be make the most difference for the student on their journey, where they have individual lagging skills or areas that they require support for. I think some of these questions I may have answered already. Out of catchment schools. So if you are waiting in the cross-boundary lineup and you're wondering whether or not your child is going to be received by the incoming school, some families choose to have that conversation optimistically with the principal at the school that they're hoping to go to. We probably wouldn't do a full transition meeting until you're confirmed for that school, but certainly you can share information with the principal at that end. Other families choose just to reach out to me and make sure that I know that their child is in the midst of a cross-boundary request, and then I can help facilitate the transfer of that information to the team when the time comes. But it doesn't hurt to have conversation at the place that you're hoping to go, just in case, and maybe a little bit of conversation at your catchment school as well, just in case. But probably the fulsome transition planning, we would wait until August. The good news is that principals are back by mid-August, so you definitely don't need to wait until the first day of school. Usually that last 2 weeks of the summer before school goes in, the schools aren't kind of wide and officially open, but the principals are absolutely there. And if you phone the school, you'll be able to have a conversation, or hopefully the COVID restrictions will have lifted enough. You may even be able to go in and have a tour and do some of that transition planning before school starts. We also use the gradual entry time for a bunch of those meetings and opportunities to spend extra time with families. So yeah. So the accessible, there is a change table in every school. So anybody who needs a diaper change can, there is a way to do that for sure. Oh, we didn't talk about medications. So if your child requires medication at school, there is a form you can fill out that identifies the dosage and timing. And we ask for a copy of the prescription bottle or something so that we can make sure that we have the information that we need. We have a locked cabinet in every school for medications. And when we administer them, we have a logbook that we record that in so we can track when they've been administered and by whom. So for sure, we can help with that. I know your children are still very little and they're probably not giving it to themselves yet, but we definitely have children as they grow independent, sometimes have the pill tucked into their lunch kit or backpack or something. We ask that you don't do that at school. It's really important that the adults at school are aware of who is taking what medication, partly to make sure it happens, but also just to make sure it's done safely and at an appropriate time of day and all of that kind of thing. So. But for sure, we can help with that. We can't administer things like Tylenol or ibuprofen, but we can administer prescriptions. Oh dear. Amy or Jen, would you like to take the next one while I sip some water? If your child's unable to stay in class all day and has an EA, can you go for a walk?
Yeah, I can take that. Or Jen, would you like to take that and I could take the next one? I think maybe you're waiting to be unmuted.
Oh, how does that keep happening? Okay.
Yay, thank you.
Sorry, if you guys mute yourself, it's going to stay muted. So just
Yeah,
don't mute yourself.
Okay.
sometimes I'm worried that people will overhear my children, so I mute myself in between the moments when I have to talk. But I realize that this is what happens. Yeah, I'm happy to take this question because often referrals that we get that get sent to inclusion support are around safety issues, but also when children have difficulties with regulation and staying focused, or they need to change activities a little bit more frequently than their peers, or they need more frequent breaks to allow them to remain regulated and sustain their attention throughout the day. So what we like to suggest is we've done a lot of work around self-regulation in kindergarten classrooms in the last few years. We had an initiative around cozy corners in every kindergarten classroom. So we've been encouraging classroom teachers to identify a corner in their classroom where they can create a cozy space. And have some calming tools, fidget tools, some books or preferred items for the child to go and have a quiet time so that they can get back, their regulation back, or become more in control of their emotions again before they're ready to engage with the group. So I find this is my 5th school year with the district as an inclusion support coordinator, and I've seen tremendous growth in that area. Sometimes students who are having a hard time paying attention at carpet time, or they don't have the attention to sustain an activity at the table, they will be encouraged to go to the cozy space and then come back when the classroom transitions to the next activity. And it's been done very successfully. And then and Amy, you probably can speak to your experience in your classroom, but as far as I'm concerned, I've seen tremendous growth in the district in that area. And I'm quite pleased to say that it is something that we do in most kindergarten classrooms.
Yeah, thanks, Genevieve. I'll just add a few points to what you were saying, specifically like speaking to the cozy corner. So that might be a nice cozy chair or a beanbag, and I've always placed that in close proximity to the carpet if we are doing a whole group activity. But as we have our spaces being more inclusive, a child may be wanting to have a snack while you're reading a story, and so some students may be at the carpet listening to the story. A child may be hungry and wanting a snack at the table, and another child may be listening to the story from the beanbag on the cozy corner. And so we have lots of different ways that we can make the classroom an inclusive space and make sure that people's needs are being taken care of. Yeah, so it doesn't need to be everybody doing the same thing at the same time.
So the next question is around meltdowns. How does the school handle meltdowns? My son can have long meltdowns, included with self-harm behavior. How would this be handled without sending him home? Well, Amy, do you want to take the first part, and then I can talk about supportive plans a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes this does happen. And one thing that kindergarten teachers look to do is be really proactive and front load information. So if an activity is coming to an end, so for example, say the center time is coming to an end, or a preferred activity is coming to an end, having a conversation with the child about what is coming next, using some visual supports, anything we can do to help support the transition before the next activity comes they're all ways we can be proactive to help have a smooth transition. And sometimes it might just be that it's okay if somebody is doing an activity a little bit longer than somebody else, and that's fine, right?
I'm just grabbing something.
Keri.
Just occurred to me I had some lozenges and I could stop coughing at everybody. Jen, did you want to talk about some of the plans that we put in place, some of the supportive plans for kids who do have behaviors that sometimes can go on for a period of time and how we support them?
Yeah, what we try to do is we try to collect as much information about the child, and what it's always best to find out what are the very subtle signs that a child is becoming dysregulated, so that we can be proactive and act before it becomes the child becomes escalated to a higher level of behaviors. So it is really our goal to identify the subtle signs and collect as much information about what are the triggers and the antecedents of the behaviors. So like I said before, behaviors are a way to for the child to communicate that something is not working for them. So we want to know what is not working for them, and try to identify as many subtle signs as we know, so that we can be proactive in offering a break, offering a preferred activity, using visuals for communication to enhance the child's language processing and ability to understand the demands. And then, kind of breaking activities in small chunks, so that we're not overwhelming the child too much. I think the most important part of our supportive plan is always to identify what is triggering the behaviors, and what are the subtle signs that the child is sending us that can help us decide what we can do at a very early stage before the meltdowns occur. Once the meltdown is happening, we also have a section in the supportive plan that help the staff to know what to do. So often we will have a plan to collect the children and then leave the classroom for a little bit, so that the child can keep their dignity and be safe to themselves and to others. So it will be outlined in the safety plan what is the best way to respond to a child's meltdowns. But our primary goal is to always prevent as many meltdowns as we can by identifying the early signs and having a selection of strategies that can be used, so that we do not have to, the child does not have, the frustration of the child doesn't come to a point where they have to express themselves through a meltdown.
Thanks. So that's not to say that there aren't occasions where children are sent home. We try really hard to not use that as a regular strategy. I mean, obviously our goal is to have children at school safe and successful and learning. But the plans that Jen described do typically describe behaviors like level 1, level 2, level 3 is kind of how we describe it. And we work with you and collaboratively around the data that we've collected and our the things we know about the child. And where we feel that we are able to intervene and support, even if it's a meltdown that's going for some time, but we have some strategies or some, we're able to transition the child to somewhere safe and allow them to express themselves and take the time they need to kind of work through that. And we know we can do that safely, then we wouldn't send them home. But sometimes those situations escalate to the point where the child is becoming a danger to themselves or others. And we have concerns that we're not going to be able to de-escalate things in a way that will allow the child to safely and comfortably pick up their day again. So again, we give them lots of time to de-escalate and support to do that. But if we have reached a point in the day where we really feel that it's too dangerous for them, either they are going to get hurt or they've injured somebody else, then there are occasions where we would have to phone families to come pick up children. But it's absolutely a last resort. And I do think that where the preventative strategies that Jen described are in place, we are able to prevent a lot of stuff from getting to the point where those calls are necessary, because there are opportunities for movement and proactive breaks and preferred activities and things like that that are quite supportive. So yeah. And again, this is one of those times where you are going to know stuff about your child that's really valuable for us, right? If there are things that you use that you know de-escalate or transition objects or preferred objects that you know, we need to have on hand and ready to grab to help with those moments, we're happy to work with you around any pieces that you know that you think would be helpful for us. I don't know if we've answered this next question already. I think we have talked about safe places to regulate, and support for transitions is another piece that we provide lots of assistance to children around. Some of it's just built into the structure. Lots of kindergartens have songs they sing as they're lining up at the door, or special jobs to help clean things up and get the room kind of, you know, set back to business before they head off to another space. But there's definitely more individualized opportunities where they're needed. And Amy, I think that top part of that question is kind of your kind of question, I think, how strict kindergarten is compared to preschool. Did you want to talk about the play piece a little bit?
Yeah, I don't want to say that kindergarten is more strict than preschool, because we're still working in a play-based environment, right? We're still working with our youngest learners, and learning is meant to be joyful and fun and what they need. So, yeah.
So a question about French immersion: if he's there and it's not a good fit for him, is it possible to transition him to the second choice school? So I've seen lots of kids with very complex needs do very, very well in French immersion, but I have also worked with families whose children, it wasn't a good fit. And so typically what we do is there's lots of conversation around the timing around that, and you know, if it's determined that a change needs to be made, typically the child would transition back to their catchment school. If there's a cross-boundary request in, then we would consider that as part of that planning. But we really do try to work together and put as many things in place as we can to have that immersion setting to be successful. So, but you definitely don't have to stay in immersion forever. If it really becomes clear that that's not the best opportunity for your child, then there is a way to move into the English program for sure. Prescription for Tylenol or ibuprofen is different, for sure. Prescription for that stuff, we're okay. What we would need is medical guidance about when and how to use it. So if you have a note from your doctor explaining it to us, we're okay. Where we run into trouble is, for example, I've had children that get chronic headaches and their family has wanted to leave a bottle of Tylenol with the secretary just in case they need one and have to come down. And we're not allowed to use non-prescription medication that way at school. If we have a prescription or even just a note from the doctor explaining when we should use it, then for sure we would be able to do that. Do EAs help with meal and cleaning up, putting shoes and jackets on? Yep, we do. Yeah. Their goal is always to help kids build independence with those things, but that, you know, takes a little bit longer for some of our little ones. And what we want is to foster independence without fostering frustration. So we try to provide adult support for as long in the ways that they need. Oh, tube feeding. We didn't even talk about that. My goodness. So we have a good relationship with the nursing support services. So if you have a child that requires tube feeding or support with insulin or diabetic care at school, any kind of, you know, sometimes there's seizure protocols and things like that that we need to be aware of. Nursing support services would come in and they provide some documentation for the school team. They do direct training with the EAs. We typically will train 2 or 3 people so that if somebody's away sick from work, we have a backup person who can come in and help. So usually at the very beginning of the year, it's a little bit tricky to schedule the nurses in all of the places they need to be right away. So we sometimes will ask parents for a little bit of support at the start of the year. It's a little bit easier with gradual entry usually because they're coming for just such a short period of time. The feed's not often needed at school those first few days. So we do our best to have that training happen before gradual entry is over. But we may, in other years where kids are starting kind of full days right from the beginning of the school, we may need a little bit of help with the feeds from you or one of your caregivers for just a few days at the start of the year while we try to get all that in place. Where we can continue an EA from one year to the next, we do that related to feeding, but EAs change schools and sometimes the needs of the schools shift and we need to reassign different adults in the building to do different responsibilities. And also they haven't done it for 2 months over the summer, so we have to refresh that training and just make sure they really understand what they're supposed to do. Same thing for glucagon pens and the anaphylaxis pens, EpiPens and things. The nurses train us for all of that stuff at school. Can parents be involved in the training? Yes, I'm hoping that the COVID will be done. Right now, we're not able to have parents in the school because of the health and safety protocols, but we'd find a way to involve you and have your input regardless. Usually it's not often that parents attend the training with the nurses because usually that's scheduled during the school day. But what's very common is that there would be a planning meeting that would involve the parent that would give you an opportunity to share information. But having said that, if you would like to be present when that training is happening, we absolutely can have you, as long as the COVID restrictions have shifted, we should be able to have you join us for that. Start and end of kindergarten. Oh, of time of day, is that the?
Yeah, time of day.
Yeah, so it's the school day. So if you check the school district website for the bell schedule at your child's school, other than the gradual entry at the beginning of the year, which maybe Amy can speak a little bit more to what that information looks like. But typically kindergarten is on the same bell schedule as the rest of the school.
Yeah, and then for gradual entry, typically in the past has looked like your child coming for an hour or 2 hours for the first day, and then coming for a morning, and then the next day coming for the afternoon, and just slowly building that time that they're at school until they reach that full day.
And the bell schedules are similar for every school, but because of transportation and bus schedules and things, sometimes they differ by like 3 or 4 minutes at different sites. So typically it's around 8:35 and the school day ends around 2:20, but it's a little bit different at every site. So you'll want to check for your individual school and just double check those times.
So we are at 7:30, Keri. I think we may have come to the end of the questions. So that was really well timed. I don't know if anybody else has any sort of follow-up comments before we wrap up for the evening.
I might just type my direct line into the chat so that if anybody has more questions that are either more personal or just too big to squeeze in at 7:31, you've got a way to get a hold of me. So let me just pop that in.
So anybody who has a team at the CDC can also reach out to their team and get Keri's contact information that way too. We're always there to support. I would like to say a huge thank you to Keri, Amy, and Genevieve for this amazing information that you've shared with us tonight. I definitely hope that everyone who's attended tonight has the information they need for a very successful transition to kindergarten. And we wish you guys all the best.
We're definitely looking forward to meeting your children this fall. Thanks for joining us this evening. And thanks, Jen and Amy, for joining me tonight too, because you've got lots of wisdom that it's much harder for me to share. So I appreciate your time.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone.